Good afternoon. My name is Sonia Lowen. I'm the Chairman of Debating SA. Welcome this afternoon. We've been coming to the chambers here since 2006, but each year it's not like automatic, so we're really glad that we've been able to continue with that and we've been allowed to use the chamber today. I think it's a very fitting venue for both teams to do their grand final at this venue. And I must say I congratulate both teams because, as everybody would know, particularly the parents and the coaches, there's been just, debate, quarterfinal, semi-final, and now you're here. So really appreciate all the effort that both teams and especially the parents and coaches have done in getting you here. So congratulations and good luck.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 2025 Year 9 Division Debating Essay Grand Final. My name is Sylvia Lim, and I am the chairperson of this debate. The timekeeper, Tanea Perel, is the timekeeper. The topic for this debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy. The affirmative team seated to my right is from St. Columba College, consisting of the first speaker, Bora Koi, second speaker, Awel Malo, third speaker, Athok Deng. And the negative team seated to my left is from Mitcham Girls High School, consisting of Opel Wangat, second speaker Tini Morton, and the third speaker Kenzo Iman. This grand final debate will be judged by a panel of 5 adjudicators, who are Miss Lillian France, Miss Sonia Lowen, Miss Rajay Siju, Miss Vessel Imvan, and Chelsea Heron. The speaking of this debate is 5 minutes, and a single warning bell will sound at 4 minutes. And a double bell will ring at 5 minutes. A continuous bell may be rung 30 seconds after the speaking time, in which case the speaker must sit down immediately. Please switch off your mobile phones and other electronic devices. I declare this debate open. I call upon the first affirmative speaker, Bora Koi.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for this afternoon's debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy, and we, as the affirmative team, wholeheartedly agree with this statement. First, I'll begin by defining key terms in this topic. We define the topic as, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, Australia, our country, whose government's first duty is to protect and uphold the rights of its citizens. Legalise, to make something that was previously illegal permissible by law. Commercial surrogacy, an arrangement where a pregnant person is paid a monetary fee, not just basic compensation, for carrying and giving birth to a child, and then transferring parental rights to the commissioning parent or parents. We recognise that not every surrogate identifies as a woman, and so we use the term pregnant person in our definition for inclusivity. That said, for the purposes of this debate, we will focus on the impact on women as they are most often affected and historically most marginalised in relation to reproductive labour. Overall, this debate is about whether Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy as a legitimate pathway to family creation and as a fair recognition for reproductive labour, for which we believe this statement is undoubtedly true. As the first speaker, I'll be speaking about autonomy and choice, as well as rewriting the narrative. Our second speaker, Awel, will be speaking about how surrogacy is a viable option for a variety of people and reproductive justice. And our third speaker, Athok, will rebut and sum up our team's case. Now onto my first point, autonomy and choice. Picture an Australian woman who wants to become a surrogate. Under our current laws, she can only do so altruistically. That means she can cover her expenses, but not be compensated for the enormous physical, emotional, and time burden she undertakes. Meanwhile, in almost every other sector of work in Australia, from medicine to law to construction, we recognise that people deserve fair pay for the risk and responsibilities they take on. The evidence shows Australians are already voting with their feet. A national survey by Medical Journey Australia found that 40% of intended parents had children through compensated surrogacy overseas, while only 1% succeeded with altruistic surrogacy at home. Nearly 46% said it was an unfair exchange to expect a woman to carry a child without a reward. Surrogacy is a form of reproductive labour, and prohibiting payment does not protect women. Rather, it restricts their autonomy. If a woman can choose to be a nurse, a builder, or a clinical trial participant, she should also be trusted to choose surrogacy as legitimate work. To forbid payment is to say women cannot be trusted to decide how their own bodies are used, and once again, marginalises women to make their own decisions. Prohibition has not stopped paid surrogacy. It has simply pushed it abroad, where regulations may be weaker and women less protected. Internationally, the picture is clear. In the US, according to Jeff Hu, the founder of Surrogate First, found that the average surrogate earns between 75 to 165,000 Australian dollars, and over 80% report satisfaction, with 83% willing to do it again. When surrogacy is legal and regulated, women are respected, supported, and are able to make autonomous choices with overwhelmingly positive outcomes. Australia should follow. Autonomy plus regulation is far more empowering than prohibition. Now to my second point, reframing the narrative. Too often, the debate on surrogacy in Australia is framed around adults, intended parents, and surrogates, when, as Dr. Patricia Fronick for the ABC said, children really need to be in the forefront of this conversation. Legalising and regulating commercial surrogacy is how we achieve that, because without payment, there are far too surrogates to meet the demand, and families are forced overseas into commercial markets with far fewer protections. When that happens, children bear the cost, left stateless, abandoned, or caught in legal limbo when foreign governments will change their laws. By legalising commercial surrogacy at home, we guarantee every child immediate legal parentage, birth registration, and nationality, while ensuring their health rights, their access to origins, and their best interests are secured under Australian law. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of this debate, it comes down to fairness and consistency. We already pay doctors for IVF, workers for physical labour, and countless others for the risk and responsibilities they take on. Yet we deny the same recognition to women who choose to be surrogates. Legalising commercial surrogacy under proper safeguards would not create exploitation, but rather empower women, protect families, and bring Australia's laws in line with the values of autonomy and justice we claim to uphold. It's time our laws caught up with our values: autonomy, fairness, and justice. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Opal Wangit.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy. We agree with the definition given by the Affirmative team. However, as the negative team, we wholeheartedly believe that this statement is false. Today's first speaker, I will be discussing the commodification and exploitation of women and children if surrogacy was commercialised in Australia. Our second speaker will talk about the health and safety risks, as well as the psychological and emotional toll commercial surrogacy would have on surrogates and children. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. The first affirmative speaker has tried to justify commercial surrogacy by claiming it gives women choice. But the reality is that most women do not freely choose surrogacy. They are driven into it by financial desperation. A genuine choice is made from empowerment and freedom, not poverty and pressure. A study conducted in the US that states that financial needs plays a huge role in the choice of becoming a commercial surrogate, meaning that women, even in developed countries, still truly don't have a choice to become a commercial surrogate. Instead, it's the urgent need for money pushing them into commercial surrogacy. Legalising commercial surrogacy will never be about giving women opportunity. That's why it needs to remain illegal in Australia. Now to my first point. Legalising commercial surrogacy in Australia would turn an act of altruism into a commodity. Using women's bodies as a money-making venture and treating children as commodities is deeply unethical and unacceptable. This is supported by the European Parliament in its Human Rights Resolution in 2025, which states that commercial surrogacy is a practice undermining the human dignity of the woman, specifically because her body and its reproductive functions are used as a commodity and are used for financial or other gain. Are we forgetting that this is not some transaction for economic profit, but humans, where the best interests of the child and surrogate should be paramount? A surrogate's choice should stem from altruistic incentives, not influenced by financial reward. Sarah Jeffords, an Australian solicitor specialising in surrogacy laws and an altruistic surrogate herself, said, "The day that I gave birth to the little one, I felt stronger and more empowered than at any other time in my life because I was able to use my body to help somebody else." This is what surrogacy should be about, not a transaction that risks reducing human life to a mere commodity. Even with regulation, commercial surrogacy in Australia would pose a substantial risk of commodification of women. This is proven through a comparison to the Australian IVF industry. According to Law Society Journal, there are no consistent IVF laws across Australia to regulate the rapidly growing IVF industry, generating more than $800 million in 2024. This has caused scandals such as incorrect embryos being transferred to patients and inaccurate records, leading to calls for uniform laws to be established. Clearly, Australia isn't ready to legalise commercial surrogacy, evident from the lack of consistent IVF laws causing heartbreak for many. To legalise commercial surrogacy at this point in time would be negligent of the government. This leads me to my second point. Allowing commercial surrogacy would create a significant risk of the exploitation of vulnerable women. The Australian Parliament has expressed concerns about how commercial surrogacy can lead to exploitation, and how commissioning parents' wishes have often been prioritised over the best interests of the child and surrogate. In a 2016 report regarding this issue, the House of Representatives Standing Committee said, "We strongly support the current legislative position in Australia, taking the stance that the risk of exploitation of surrogates remains significant." Even in a developed country like Australia, commercial surrogacy would inevitably lead to exploitation of women. Statistics from the Australian government in 2022 show that 1 in 7 females live under the poverty line, and around 54,000 are considered homeless. Margaret Somermill, a professor of bioethics and law, stated that women who become a surrogate, they'll do it because they need the money. Can you imagine the lengths vulnerable women in Australia would go to if commercial surrogacy was legalised, and how easily they could be exploited? Xavier Simons, a bioethicist at Australian Catholic University, states, "I definitely think we shouldn't legalise commercial surrogacy. The possibilities for exploitation are too high, even when it is regulated. My concern is that there are things we shouldn't pay for or sell, pregnancy and childbirth an example of that." Evidently, the safest, most appropriate option is to keep commercial surrogacy illegal, instead promoting altruistic surrogacy and using resources to ensure equitable opportunity to have children. Anything less would compromise the integrity of our society and the values we hold. Can we truly justify the risk of exploiting women for the sake of commercial surrogacy? So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, as the negative team, we firmly believe that the risks of commercial surrogacy are too serious to justify legislation. By keeping commercial surrogacy in Australia illegal, women and children are protected from exploitation and life cannot be treated as a commodity. This is why Australia needs to keep commercial surrogacy illegal. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Awel Malel.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for this debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy. We, the negative team, wholeheartedly agree. We, the affirmative team, wholeheartedly agree with this statement. I would now like to highlight the flaws in the opposition's arguments. The first speaker from the negative team has claimed that surrogacy turns women's bodies into commodities. That claim ignores how ethical surrogacy actually works. A 2008 WHO review found that in countries with strong regulation, surrogacy is treated as a healthcare process, not commercial transaction. Intended parents and surrogates undergo medical, psychological, and legal screening to ensure informed consent. In systems like Canada or the UK, payment is limited or not allowed at all. Regulated surrogacy protects dignity. It doesn't undermine it. Suggesting otherwise often reflects outdated stereotypes, not the facts on the ground. Our first speaker, Bull, raised concerns around autonomy and choice, as well as IVF versus surrogacy. Today, as a second speaker, I'll be speaking about two key points: how surrogacy is a viable option for many different people and reproductive justice. Our third speaker, Thok, will rebut some of our team's case. Now on to my points. Firstly, how surrogacy is a viable option for a variety of people. Commercial surrogacy is often the only realistic pathway to biological parenthood for individuals and couples who are unable to conceive or carry a pregnancy. This can include women with medical conditions such as uterine abnormalities, fallopian tube damage, and infertility from cancer treatments, or even high-risk pregnancies where carrying a child would significantly endanger the health of the mother and the child. For these individuals, finding a surrogate in Australia is a challenge in itself. According to the Monash University, there were 213 Australian babies born through international surrogacy during the 2021-2022 financial year. In that same year, less than 100 surrogacy births were reported by Australian and New Zealand fertility clinics. The harsh reality is that without proper compensation for the physical, emotional, and time burden carrying a child takes, only 1 in 5 intended parents seeking a surrogate will find one in Australia. This demonstrates a clear imbalance, that the demand for surrogacy in Australia far outweighs the supply of altruistic surrogates. Relying solely on altruism means that the vast majority of intended parents are left with no option but to turn overseas, where legal protection for both the surrogate and intended parents differ. By legalising commercial surrogacy in Australia, we remove this barrier. Proper and fair compensation acknowledges the very real sacrifices that surrogates make. 9 months of physical risk, emotional strain, and life disruption. Far from being exploitive, legal commercial surrogacy in Australia would create transparency, dignity, and fairness while preventing these desperate parents from being pushed into unsafe international markets. Now to my second point, reproductive justice. According to the World Health Organization, reproductive justice means that everyone has the right to have or to not have children, get the information, education, and support to make these decisions, and base the decisions on the best information possible. Current laws in Australia, which only allow altruistic surrogacy, limits this right, not just by restricting options, but by creating inequality in access. In most cases, only those who know someone willing to volunteer as a surrogate or those who can afford risky overseas arrangements can exercise their reproductive rights fully. Legal commercial surrogacy addresses this inequality while safeguarding all parties. Proper regulation ensures that surrogates receive fair compensation for the physical, emotional, and social demands of pregnancy, while also providing medical, psychological, and legal protections. This ensures that surrogates are respected, supported, rather than exploited. At the same time, intended parents' rights are protected. Regulated commercial surrogacy guarantees legal recognition of parenthood and reduces the harms associated with unsafe or unregulated overseas arrangements. In this way, legalizing commercial surrogacy is not simply about creating more opportunities. It is about ensuring justice, dignity, and equality for both surrogates and intended parents, regardless of disability, sexuality, or medical circumstances. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Australia's current laws leave intended parents without options and surrogates without proper recognition. Legalizing commercial surrogacy changes that. It provides families with a safe and realistic pathway to parenthood while ensuring surrogates are fairly compensated, supported, and protected. Far from being exploitative, it creates dignity, equality, and transparency for everyone involved. That is why commercial surrogacy must be legalized in Australia. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Tani Morton.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy. We, the negative team, believe that this statement is undoubtedly false. I will now rebut. The second affirmative speaker has alleged that since there aren't enough altruistic surrogates, commercial surrogacy is apparently justifiable. However, just because we don't have enough altruistic surrogates does not mean we have the right to legalise something that, as our first speaker has already explained, exploits women, especially when there are alternatives, such as IVF and adoption. A shortage does not justify exploitation. To recap, our first speaker to discuss the risks of commoditisation and exploitation that would come with commercial surrogacy. I will speak to you about the health and safety concerns and deep psychological and emotional burdens that it would entail. Now, to my first point. Legalising commercial surrogacy would push aside important health and safety concerns. In a Monash University study, 37% of Australians reported that their commercial surrogate overseas used multiple embryo transfer. This is when numerous embryos are implanted into the surrogate uterus to increase pregnancy rate, according to the National Institute of Health. The study states that 27% of parents who used international surrogacy had preterm births, and 11% had twins or triplets, versus the 11% of Australian single embryo surrogacies who had preterm births, and 0 who had twins or triplets. Unfortunately, there's a reason those international industries use multiple embryo transfer, and as our second speaker stated, defects in Australia's existing processes show that the country cannot guarantee a safer industry. The reason is that if multiple embryo transfer isn't used, the pregnancy rate drops and increases the chance that multiple separate transfers will be required. And according to Sensible Surrogacy, the cost of one transfer in the US equates to over $214,000 to over $275,000 Australian dollars. In a commercial contract, can you really expect the intended parents to pay the commercial fee, medical fees, and 2 times that cost for just one pregnancy? Or is the hefty cost to fall on the already struggling healthcare system? The danger commercialisation poses is that, according to Women's Health Melbourne, twin pregnancies are considered high risk. A mother of twins is more likely to require a caesarean delivery. She's also more likely to suffer various blood problems, organ dysfunction, displacement or damage, preterm labour, pelvic instability, and pain. The list goes on. As for the baby, they also state, many twins are born before the full-term zone. Being born prematurely puts babies at high risk of many disabilities like cerebral palsy, vision impairment, respiratory problems, and cognitive deficits. Preterm birth is also, according to the WHO, the leading cause of death in children under 5. Preterm birth is more than double as likely in commercial surrogacy than it is in altruistic surrogacy, if we remember my earlier findings on Monash's study. Is the commercialisation of surrogacy really worth the human life that would be put at risk? No. This leads me to my second point, that commercialising surrogacy would also endanger the psychological and emotional health of both surrogate and child. To quote a Science Direct article, that most relationships were viewed as positive is perhaps partly due to the altruistic surrogacy process, in which no commercial brokers exist to mediate relationships, and trusting relationships may often develop between the surrogate and couple. In the commercial process, these connections are replaced with transactions, and the surrogates often can't be involved in the intended family's life.
These disconnected transactions are the relationships Australia would welcome if the country legalised commercial surrogacy. And their effects are heartbreaking. In a BBC interview, commercial surrogates told the news, "It was hard. I had become attached to it and it just disappeared. For 3 months after giving birth, I spent sleepless nights. I would get headaches thinking about the baby and I had to take medicines to calm down." And the harm caused is not just to surrogates. A study published in the Journal of the Child, Psychology and Psychiatry found that children born via surrogacy may experience greater difficulties in emotional well-being, psychological health, and social interactions. The journal also mentioned that stress significantly increased when a child's origins were kept secret. To reiterate, this surrogacy anonymity and all its consequences are often part of disconnected, transactional, commercial surrogacy. So, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, we, the Negative team, devotedly believe that Australia should not legalise commercial surrogacy. It would risk the emotional and psychological well-being, the medical health, and the lives of surrogates and the children of surrogates. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Athok Deng.
In Australia, you can be paid to build a house, but not help build a family. Let that sink in. We respect people who use their bodies to do physical labour every day. We pay them, we protect them, and we value their choice. So why do we strip that same dignity from women who choose to carry a child for someone else? Right now, Australia's refusal to legalise commercial surrogacy doesn't protect women, it punishes them. It forces intended parents to go overseas and leave everyone without the safeguard they deserve. Because at the core of this debate, this is about dignity, choice, and justice. I'll now rebut the flaws in the opposition's case. The first speaker from the Negative team has claimed that surrogacy exploits women's poverty. But as Bohr explained, surrogacy is legitimate reproductive labour, and to say poor women cannot consent is to infantilize them and deny their autonomy, to treat them as if they were children, incapable of making their own rational, informed decisions about their own bodies and futures. As the well showed, prohibition only pushes Australians offshores, and protection for women are far weaker. True feminism means trusting women as capable agents of choice, not denying them opportunities under the guise of protection. The first speaker from the Negative team has also argued that surrogacy commodifies reproduction. But ethical surrogacy is not about choice. It's about choice, not commerce. The UN Special Reporter on Sale of Children 2020 emphasised that surrogacy with full consent, legal safeguards and medical oversight is not commodification. It is a voluntary medical arrangement and ignores the autonomy of the women who choose to be surrogates. The real issue isn't surrogacy itself, it's whether or not there's proper regulation. And when that's in place, this argument simply doesn't hold up. The speaker from the Negative team has suggested that payment will undermine altruism. And let's be clear, altruistic surrogacy alone isn't working. Demand in Australia far outstrips supply, which is why hundreds of couples go overseas each year into unregulated markets where exploitation risks are higher. If we really want to protect altruism, we must regulate at home. Payment doesn't replace compassion. It keeps it safe, fair, and accessible.
The second speaker from the negative team has told you that pregnancy is unbearable, tough, and dangerous. But as Ball explained, surrogacy is a form of reproductive labour, and prohibiting payment does not protect women. It restricts their autonomy. And if pregnancy is so tough, then surely that labour deserves fair compensation, just like any other high-risk work in Australia. Respecting women means recognising the risks of pregnancy and paying them fairly, not demanding they do it for free. I'll now summarise my team's case. Our first speaker, Ball, spoke about how banning compensation restricts women's autonomy and pushes surrogacy overseas. She also highlighted how regulation ensures children's rights and safety come first. Our second speaker, Well, stated how commercial surrogacy meets the unmet demand of Australian families facing medical barriers. She also discussed how legal surrogacy ensures justice, equality, and protection for all parties. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the voices of surrogates must be heard and valued. Any policy that ignores their experiences ultimately fails the very people it aims to protect. When conducted ethically and fairly, surrogacy offers hope and family to many, while upholding the dignity and autonomy of those who make it possible. We must embrace this reality and not fear it. Facing this issue without guidance is like crossing a desert without a map. Each step risks deeper confusion and exhaustion. And as Sarah Bevan once said, it is far preferable for Australians not to have to resort to international surrogacy. Thank you.
I call upon the third negative speaker, Izil Iman.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for today's debate is that Australia should legalise commercial surrogacy. We, the negative team, firmly believe that this statement is false. I will now rebut the opposition. The first affirmative speaker has asserted that people have their rights to decide how they form their families, and therefore a process as misguided and twisted as commercial surrogacy is apparently required. However, the affirmative point confuses freedom with entitlement. Rights are not absolute. They are limited when exercising them causes harm. Commercial surrogacy clearly causes harm by treating children as products and exploiting women, as our first speaker has already said. According to the Australian government, commercial surrogacy carries a greater risk that surrogates may be exploited and have their human rights breached. How can we justify a system that endangers women, turns children into products, and undermines human rights? The first affirmative speaker has also stated that commercial surrogacy protects the best interests of the child. But why should we trust that the system, as twisted as commercial surrogacy, actually cares about the child? The reason why commercial surrogacy is illegal in Australia in the first place, as stated by the Australian government, is because there's a high risk of turning children into products. How can we believe that this industry actually cares about children when it thrives by turning them into products? She also stated that commercial surrogacy empowers women and doesn't exploit them. But let's be honest, who really ends up becoming surrogates in these situations? Is it wealthy middle-class women with financial stability? No, it's vulnerable women who are in vulnerable financial positions who feel pressured to rent out their bodies just to survive. Research from India in 2010 shows that when commercial surrogacy was legal there, many of the surrogates were forced into this by poverty, not choice. The second affirmative speaker has tried to argue that with enough regulation, everyone, including the surrogates, will be fine.
But our second speaker has already proven how misguided this argument truly is. Can you really regulate human emotions? Imagine carrying a baby for 9 months, feeling every kick, every heartbeat, then being told to give it all away just because a contract says so. Research from a study called Javada et al. In 2012 shows that many surrogates experience grief, trauma, long-term psychological stress after the handover. Can you truly just legalize away a mother's bond with her child? No law can stop that pain. Legalizing commercial surrogacy does not make it safe. It just normalizes suffering and heartbreak for the women involved. The second affirmative speaker has also alleged that legalizing commercial surrogacy would allow for better protection for surrogates. However, no amount of protection will take away the fact that commercial surrogacy turns women's bodies into rental services and children into products. The Australian Journal of Family Law notes that poverty combined with profit leads to exploitation, and according to the Australian Health Institution, around 1 in every 7 Australian women live in poverty. Meaning that if we were to legalise commercial surrogacy in Australia, most surrogates would only agree to this agreement out of financial need, not choice, and a contract will never be able to erase this reality. The third speaker has tried to claim that legalising commercial surrogacy would prevent demand from shifting into less regulated countries. However, in reality, according to a CNBC report, numerous US parents are drawn to international surrogacy just to reduce cost. So legalising this misguided system in Australia will never stop overseas markets. Now I present to you our team case. Tonight, our first speaker has greatly stressed how legalising commercial surrogacy would turn women's bodies into rental services and children into products, and how surrogacy and childbirth is something ethically unacceptable to sell or pay for. She also stated how legalising commercial surrogacy increases the risk of exploitation. Our second speaker has emphasised how commercial surrogacy in Australia creates severe health and safety risks to the surrogate. She further discussed how commercial surrogacy endangers the psychological and emotional well-being of the surrogate. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, should we really legalise a system that thrives off the endangerment of women and children? Commercial surrogacy will never be beneficial to anyone. Instead, it will forever remain exploitation disguised as equality. Thank you.
I call upon a representative of the adjudication panel to come forward and award the debate.
Hello everyone, my name is Liliana France. I'm on the board of Debating SA. First thing I want to say is I hope both of you teams feel really proud of your achievements today. Making it to the grand final in Parliament House is a massive achievement, so regardless of the outcome today, you should guys feel really proud of what you've achieved. It's been fantastic to watch you all year. Because it was a panel of 5 today, you won't be getting any feedback, and to be honest, if you've made it here, I think you don't need any more feedback. I think you're doing just fine. Alrighty, so it was a split decision today of 3-2, but we want to award the win this afternoon, to the Affirmative team. So congratulations.
I call up a member from the runners-up team to give a vote of thanks.
First off, thank you to everybody who came today. Thank you, St. Columba, you debated really well. Thank you, Debate SA, for organising the debates. Thank you to the adjudicators, and thank you to all the audience members, and thank you.
I call upon a member from the winning team to second that vote of thanks.
I would like to thank the audience for coming out here and our coaches for supporting us this whole way. I want to say a special thank you to Brian for always helping us and for always being there for us. I want to thank the opposition. You guys were really well. And yeah, thank you everyone. To the adjudicators as well, sorry. Because especially Ms. Lowen, thank you for running this amazing organization. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.